The phone buzzed relentlessly on the passenger seat, its glow a pulsating reminder of the chaos I had just walked away from. As I turned onto the empty highway, I glanced at the screen. It was Emma, my wife, calling for the 10th time in a row. My chest tightened, but my resolve held firm. Whatever she had to say could wait. Then the words I'd never forget echoed in my head again. "Get back home, you damn bastard," she had screamed earlier, yanking the phone from our daughter Lily's hands. Her tone, venomous and raw, was so unlike the woman I'd married that it felt like a stranger had invaded her body. "I'm not even thinking about coming back to a place where a 304 is screwing some guy in my bed," I had replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "If you want to act like a hurt little boy and refuse to talk about this like rational adults, go ahead," she snapped back. "But know this, from now on, I'll sleep with every man I find in this house." The sheer audacity of her response had left me numb. Was this the same Emma I'd spent a decade with? The mother of my child? The woman I thought I knew better than myself? It had started innocently enough, or so I thought. Subtle changes in her behavior crept in like shadows stretching at dusk. Late-night outings became the norm, always justified with vague excuses. "Book club," she'd say, or "just catching up with an old friend." Her once warm smiles had turned colder, her laughter no longer bubbling up from shared moments but from a world I wasn't part of. My suspicions grew when I found a receipt in her purse, dinner for two at a restaurant I'd never heard of. My first instinct was denial. Surely, there was a reasonable explanation. But the gnawing feeling in my gut refused to be ignored. I hired a private detective named Carter, a gruff, no-nonsense man who had clearly seen his fair share of human deceit. "Trust your instincts," he'd said during our first meeting. And so, I did. What Carter uncovered was worse than I had ever imagined. Not one lover, not two, but an entire list. Names, dates, and places filled a folder he handed me with grim finality. Emma hadn't just been unfaithful, she had turned infidelity into a sport. As I gripped the steering wheel tighter, flashes of that conversation replayed in my mind. "I have everything I need," I told her earlier when I stormed out. "Go ahead," she had taunted. "You think you're the first man to feel betrayed? You're pathetic." Pathetic. The word had landed like a sucker punch. But in the silence of the car, I found clarity. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. And I wouldn't let her walk away unscathed. Carter had suggested letting the lawyers handle it, but I had other plans. Every man on that list would face consequences. If you slept with another man's wife, you deserved to feel the weight of your actions. I pulled into a deserted rest stop and parked under the harsh glow of a streetlight. As the car engine hummed its final notes, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Emma. It was Carter. "Got something else for you," he said when I picked up. His voice carried the grim satisfaction of a man delivering bad news. "You're going to want to see this." "Send it," I replied, already dreading what new betrayal awaited me. Moments later, a series of photos landed in my inbox. Emma, laughing with a man at a bar. The same man entering my home hours later. And the final blow, a shot of them tangled in my bed, the sheets I had chosen for our anniversary mockingly visible in the frame. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles whitened. The rage that had simmered below the surface now boiled over. She had made her choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. It's strange how the mind clings to hope, even when the evidence is piled high against it. As I drove back to the motel that night, I replayed the details in my head, trying to make sense of it all. But no matter how I sliced it, the truth was undeniable. Emma had betrayed me, not just once, but repeatedly, and unapologetically. The morning after Carter sent the photos, I sat in the dingy motel room with a pot of black coffee and the folder he'd given me. I spread its contents across the small table. The list of names stared back at me, each one a grim reminder of her deceit. There was Jack, the guy from her gym. Tim, a coworker I vaguely remembered meeting at a Christmas party. And then, the one that hit the hardest, Brent, my so-called friend. The pictures confirmed everything Carter had said. Emma's expressions in them were sickeningly carefree, laughing, leaning into Brent at the bar, her hand resting on his thigh. How could she so easily discard the years we'd built together? I couldn't stop myself from thinking about Lily. She was only 8, an innocent caught in the crossfire of her parents' imploding marriage. I thought about her handing me the phone last night, her wide eyes confused as Emma snatched it away and hurled insults at me. Was she already picking up on the cracks in our family? The first time I noticed something was wrong was months ago when Emma suddenly started locking her phone. We had always been open about those things. I'd joke about snooping through her messages, and she'd roll her eyes and hand me her phone. But one night, when I jokingly reached for it, she snatched it away. "You've lost your mind if you think I'm letting you snoop through my stuff," she said, her voice sharp and defensive. That was the first domino. After that, I started noticing other things. She'd come home from work meetings smelling of unfamiliar cologne. Her texts were shorter, her attention often elsewhere when we spoke. Then there was the night I found her earrings, the ones I bought her for her birthday, tucked away in the glove compartment of her car. "Oh, I must have forgotten to take them out after the gym," she said with a dismissive laugh. A perfectly rehearsed lie. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my own insecurities. But then came the day I overheard her whispering on the phone. She was standing in the kitchen, her back to me, speaking in hushed tones. "I can't wait to see you," she said, her voice tinged with excitement I hadn't heard in years. When I asked her about it later, she claimed it was just a friend. "Don't be ridiculous, Jack. You're acting paranoid," she said, brushing me off like a child. Carter's investigation had removed all doubt. He delivered his findings with the efficiency of a seasoned professional, but I could see the pity in his eyes as he laid it all out. "You've got the right to know," he said as he handed me the photos. There was a video too. I hesitated before pressing play, but I needed to see it. In the grainy footage, Emma kissed Brent in a parking lot, their embrace anything but innocent. The timestamp on the video was from 2 days ago, the same night she told me she was stuck working late. My stomach churned as the reality of it all sank in. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the effort she'd put into lying, the ease with which she deceived me. I decided to confront Brent first. I needed to hear it from him, to see if he'd own up to what he'd done. I found him at his garage, the one he'd always bragged about. As I pulled in, he greeted me with that fake, toothy grin of his, the one I now knew hid his true nature. "Jack. Long time no see," he said, wiping grease off his hands. I got straight to the point. "How long have you been screwing my wife?" The grin disappeared, replaced by a look of panic. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I've got proof. Pictures, videos. You think you can mess around with Emma and walk away clean?" He stammered, his excuses pitiful. "It wasn't like that, man. She said things were over between you two. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" My voice rose, and I stepped closer. "You're a coward, Brent. You smiled in my face while sneaking around with her behind my back." Before I knew it, my fist connected with his jaw. He staggered back, holding his face, but I didn't stop. The rage boiled over, years of trust and friendship dissolving into the dust of his workshop floor. When I got back to the motel that evening, Carter called again. "There's more you need to know," he said. "What now?" I asked, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "Emma's not just cheating. She's been funneling money from your joint account. Thousands, Jack. She's been spending it on these guys, trips, gifts, you name it. My heart sank. It wasn't just my marriage she'd destroyed, it was my future. I stared out the motel window that night, the city lights blurring as tears welled up in my eyes. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal, the lies, or the fact that I had ignored the signs for so long. I swore to myself that I wouldn't let her get away with it. Not Emma, not Brent, not any of them. If they thought they could destroy my life without consequences, they were about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I drove back to the house I had once called home. I parked a block away, steeling myself for what was about to happen. The weight of the evidence in my bag felt like a physical burden, pressing down on me with each step I took toward the door. I knew Emma would be there, her car was in the driveway. When I opened the front door, the smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted me, a cruel reminder of normalcy in a situation that was anything but. Emma stood in the kitchen, her back to me, humming as if everything were fine. "Jack," she called without turning. "You're back early. Lily's at school." I slammed the door shut, cutting her off mid-sentence. She turned, startled by the sound, her face shifting from confusion to annoyance when she saw me. "What's with the theatrics?" she asked, leaning casually against the counter. Her calm demeanor made my blood boil. I dropped the folder onto the kitchen island with a thud. "You tell me, Emma," I said, my voice ice-cold. She glanced at the folder, her expression flickering for a split second before she masked it with indifference. "What's this?" "Proof," I replied. "Of your affairs. Of your lies. Of everything you've been doing behind my back." Her eyes narrowed as she crossed her arms. "So, what? You've been spying on me?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Spying? No, Emma. I've been trying to find out why the woman I married turned into a stranger who can't even look me in the eye anymore." She rolled her eyes and opened the folder, flipping through the photos and documents. When she got to the list of names, she smirked. "Is this supposed to shock me? You think I don't know what's in here?" Her lack of remorse was like gasoline on a fire. "You don't even care, do you?" I shouted, my voice cracking with anger. "You've been sleeping with other men in our bed, Emma. You've been stealing from me, from Lily. How can you stand there and act like this doesn't matter?" "It doesn't," she snapped, slamming the folder shut. "You're the one who let our marriage fall apart, Jack. You ignored me for years, made me feel invisible. Don't act like this is all on me." "Oh, so this is my fault now?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're blaming me for your decision to betray me, to betray us?" "Yes," she said bluntly. "Because you're a coward who doesn't know how to face reality. You want to play the victim? Fine. But don't expect me to feel guilty for finding happiness somewhere else." The room fell silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Happiness? That's what she called this? I pulled out my phone and opened the video Carter had sent me. I hit play and held the screen up to her face. "Happiness, huh? Was this what happiness looked like 2 nights ago when you were with Brent in our bed?" Her smug expression faltered as the video played. She tried to grab the phone, but I pulled it away. "Don't," I growled. "You don't get to run from this." Her face twisted into a sneer. "You're pathetic, Jack. Spying on me like some obsessed stalker. Do you think this makes you look strong? It makes you look desperate." "Desperate?" I echoed, laughing bitterly. "You want to talk about desperate? You've been lying, cheating, and stealing, Emma. And now you're standing here, trying to gaslight me into thinking this is somehow my fault." She crossed her arms again, her tone turning icy. "So what now, Jack? Are you going to cry about it? Are you going to pack your bags and run off to some cheap motel? Or are you actually going to be a man and have a real conversation?" I stared at her, incredulous. A real conversation? Like the ones you've been having with Brent? Or Tim? Or Jack from the gym? Her eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare throw their names at me like that, she hissed. You have no idea what I've been through, Jack. None. And whose fault is that? I shot back. I was here, Emma. I was always here. You're the one who chose to check out. The tension in the room was suffocating. She glared at me, her face a mixture of anger and defiance. Fine, she said finally. If you want to end this, then end it. But don't you dare think for a second that you're the victim here. You're just as guilty as I am. Her words stung, but I refused to let them break me. I'll take that under consideration, I said coolly. Right after I talk to the lawyer. Her eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her armor. You wouldn't, she said, her voice wavering. Watch me, I replied. As I turned to leave, her voice stopped me. You think this makes you better than me, she spat. Dragging lawyers into this? Ruining Lily's life because you can't handle the truth? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. You already ruined Lily's life, Emma. You just didn't care enough to notice. With that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. My heart felt heavy, but my resolve was stronger than ever. I wasn't just going to let her destroy everything I'd worked for. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. When I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, the air felt different, thicker, heavier, like I was suffocating under the weight of my own thoughts. I leaned against my car, my mind racing. My marriage, my home, my life, they all felt like fragile facades shattered by Emma's lies. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. The city blurred past me, but I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to escape the suffocating reality of what had just happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, smug, unapologetic, and cruel. Her words echoed in my head, "You're just as guilty as I am." Guilty? For what? Working long hours to provide for her and Lily? Trusting her when she said she was going to yoga class or work events? Guilty for believing in us, even when the signs were screaming at me to wake up? My knuckles tightened on the steering wheel as a wave of anger surged through me. I pulled over to the side of the road, unable to drive any further. My hands were shaking, and my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. That night, back in the motel room, the emotions hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I had built my life around Emma and Lily, around the idea of a family. And now it was gone. I thought about Lily, her small voice on the phone as she called me Daddy. She didn't deserve this. None of this was her fault, and yet she would be the one to suffer the most. I pictured her sitting in her room, wondering why her dad was suddenly gone, why her parents were fighting. The guilt hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to be strong for her, but how could I when I felt like my entire world had crumbled? I stared at my phone, debating whether to call someone, anyone, just to get the poison out of my head. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on Ryan's name. My brother had always been the one person I could rely on. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. "Jack? It's late. What's going on?" I didn't even know where to start. "She's been cheating on me, Ryan," I blurted out. "Emma. 4 months. Maybe years. With multiple guys." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Jack, are you serious?" "Emma?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah. The perfect wife, right? Turns out she's been screwing around behind my back while I've been busting my ass to give her and Lily a good life." Ryan cursed under his breath. "What are you going to do?" I confronted her, I said, my voice shaking. She didn't even deny it. She acted like I was the one who ruined everything. Like this is all my fault. She's manipulating you, Ryan said firmly. Don't let her get in your head, Jack. You've done nothing wrong. Hearing those words felt like a lifeline. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of clarity. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The anger was still there, burning quietly beneath the surface, but it was tempered by a determination to take control of the situation. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I explained everything, the infidelity, the money she'd stolen, the evidence Carter had gathered. The lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Diane, didn't sugarcoat things. This is going to get messy, she warned. But with the evidence you have, you're in a strong position. We'll file for divorce, and we'll fight for custody of your daughter. Are you prepared for that? Whatever it takes, I said. Later that day, I met with Carter again. This time, it wasn't just about gathering evidence, it was about planning my next move. I want to know everything, I told him. Every guy she's been with, every dollar she's spent. I want her to feel the weight of what she's done. Carter nodded, his expression serious. I'll keep digging. But Jack, be careful. Revenge can be a slippery slope. I'm not looking for revenge, I said, though the fire in my chest told me otherwise. I just want justice. That evening, I drove past the house again. The lights were on, and through the window, I saw Emma sitting at the dining table, laughing on the phone like nothing had happened. The sight made my blood boil. How could she be so carefree, so unaffected, after everything she'd done? I parked down the street and sat there for a while, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to storm in and demand answers, to make her feel the pain she'd caused me. But I knew it wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I sent her a text, "We'll talk through our lawyers from now on. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow." Her response came almost instantly, "Do whatever you want. Just don't expect me to make it easy for you." Typical Emma. Always needing the last word. Back at the motel, I started packing my things. I couldn't stay there forever, it was time to start rebuilding my life. As I folded my clothes into a suitcase, I thought about what Ryan had said, "Don't let her get in your head." Easier said than done, but I knew he was right. Emma had taken so much from me already, my trust, my dignity, my sense of security. I wouldn't let her take my future too. This wasn't the end for me. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would take back control of my life. The next day began with a weighty resolve. I wasn't going to let Emma's betrayal define me or my future. I walked into Diane's office, armed with every piece of evidence Carter had gathered, ready to start the battle that would inevitably change the course of my life. Diane, sharp and no-nonsense, wasted no time. "We're going to file for divorce immediately," she said, flipping through the files I handed over. "With this level of evidence, we can also pursue primary custody of your daughter. But be prepared, Emma's going to fight back. People like her don't go down quietly." Her words were both reassuring and sobering. "What about the money she took?" I asked. "We'll subpoena her financial records," Diane replied. "If she used joint funds to finance her affairs, we can bring that to the court's attention. Every dime she's stolen can be accounted for, and she'll have to answer for it." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. I left Diane's office more determined than ever, but also fully aware that the road ahead would be long and grueling. Later that afternoon, I picked Lily up from school. She ran toward me with her backpack bouncing behind her, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Daddy!" I knelt down and hugged her tightly, holding on longer than usual. "Hey, sweetheart. How was school?" "Good. We painted pictures in art class. Mine is of a rainbow. I'll show you when we get home." The word home hit me like a punch to the gut. Lily didn't know yet that her world was about to change. I couldn't let her feel the weight of this mess. She deserved to hold on to her innocence for as long as possible. "Can we go get ice cream?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Of course we can," I said, forcing a smile. Sitting across from Lily at the ice cream parlor, I watched her chatter away about her day, her friends, and her rainbow painting. Her joy was infectious, momentarily lifting the heavy cloud that had been hanging over me. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw Emma's name. "Call me. We need to talk." I ignored the message and focused on Lily, savoring the simple pleasure of being with her. For now, Emma could wait. That evening, back at the motel, Emma's messages became more persistent. "You can't just cut me out like this. We need to discuss Lily's future. Answer me, Jack." Eventually, my phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen, and despite every fiber of my being wanting to let it go to voicemail, I picked up. "What do you want, Emma?" I asked, my tone cold. "You're really going through with this?" she snapped. "A divorce? Lawyers? Do you have any idea what this will do to Lily?" "Don't you dare pretend to care about Lily now," I said, my voice low and steady. "You didn't think about her when you were screwing other men in our home." Her silence was deafening. Then, she lashed out. "You're such a self-righteous bastard, Jack. Acting like you're some perfect husband. You're just bitter because I found happiness somewhere else." "Happiness?" I repeated, my anger boiling over. "Is that what you call sneaking around and lying to your husband and daughter? If that's your idea of happiness, Emma, you can keep it. You're not going to win this," she spat. "I'll fight you every step of the way." "Do whatever you need to do," I replied. "But this ends now. I'm done letting you control the narrative." The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with Diane, gathering documents, and preparing for the legal battle ahead. At the same time, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Lily. One evening, as I was helping her with her homework, she asked, "Daddy, why aren't you staying at home anymore?" The question froze me. How could I explain this to a 6-year-old without shattering her world? "I'm just staying somewhere else for a little while," I said gently. "But I'm still here for you, always." She seemed to accept the answer, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. It broke my heart. Meanwhile, Emma ramped up her attempts to control the situation. She started posting on social media, painting herself as the victim of a cold, distant husband who had abandoned his family. Mutual friends reached out, some offering support, others questioning my actions. "Jack, what's going on?" Ryan asked during a phone call. "Emma's making it sound like you're the one who ruined things." "She's lying," I said bluntly. "She's trying to save face because she knows the truth is ugly." "Well, don't let her get to you," Ryan said. "People who know you will see through her crap." As the court date approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Diane had been thorough, building a solid case against Emma. But I knew that facing her in court would be brutal. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in the motel room, going over everything in my head. The betrayal, the confrontation, the moments of doubt and anger, it all felt surreal. But through the haze of emotions, one thought stood out: I was doing this for Lily. She deserved better than the chaos Emma had created. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. Emma was already there, dressed to the nines, her expression cold and defiant. As the proceedings began, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about reclaiming my life. Walking into the courtroom felt like stepping onto a battlefield. The air was charged with tension, every whispered conversation between attorneys and clients like the hushed strategy of opposing armies. I caught sight of Emma seated at her table, flanked by her high-priced lawyer. She looked composed, confident even, as though she truly believed she could twist this mess in her favor. The sight ignited a fire in me. I wasn't here for her anymore, I was here for Lily and for myself. The damage Emma had done would take years to heal, but I wouldn't let her drag Lily down with her. Diane was a force of nature, her sharp voice slicing through the courtroom as she presented the evidence Carter had uncovered. Photos, videos, financial statements, it was all laid bare. Your Honor, Diane began, her tone resolute, we will demonstrate that Mrs. Emma Carter not only engaged in extramarital affairs but also misused joint funds to facilitate these liaisons, all while neglecting her responsibilities as a spouse and mother. Emma's lawyer objected to the phrasing, but the judge allowed Diane to proceed. The evidence was damning. Photos of Emma with her various lovers at restaurants, hotels, and even in our home flashed on a screen. Receipts followed, showing charges on our joint account that corresponded to these rendezvous. I could see the judge's expression harden as each piece of evidence stacked up against Emma. When it was Emma's turn to take the stand, her demeanor shifted. She put on an air of vulnerability, painting herself as a woman trapped in a loveless marriage. Jack was never around, she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem believable. He worked late every night, and when he was home, he barely spoke to me. I felt invisible, unwanted. I clenched my fists under the table, biting my tongue to keep from shouting. Diane had warned me to let her handle it, and I trusted her. Did you ever attempt to address these concerns with your husband? Emma's lawyer asked, playing into her narrative. I tried, Emma lied, dabbing at imaginary tears. But he would just brush me off. He made me feel like I didn't matter. When Diane cross-examined her, the charade began to unravel. Mrs. Carter, are we to believe that your response to feeling invisible was to spend thousands of dollars from your joint account on secret trips and expensive dinners with other men? Diane's tone was ice-cold. Emma hesitated, her confidence cracking. I didn't intend for things to get so out of hand. But they did, Diane pressed. And in doing so, you not only betrayed your husband but also compromised the financial stability of your family. Is that correct? Emma's lawyer objected again, but the damage was done. The courtroom could see through her act. When I took the stand, I didn't focus on Emma's betrayal. Instead, I spoke about Lily, how much I loved her, how I wanted to provide her with a stable, loving environment. Lily is my world, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. She deserves parents who put her needs first. I'm here today because I want to give her that stability, to protect her from the chaos Emma has brought into our lives. Diane followed up with questions that painted me as the devoted father I was, emphasizing the sacrifices I had made to provide for my family. Emma's lawyer tried to poke holes in my testimony, but the evidence spoke louder than any cross-examination could. After hours of back-and-forth arguments, the judge finally delivered his decision. He granted me primary custody of Lily, citing Emma's reckless behavior and poor judgment as significant factors. Emma's reaction was explosive. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, standing up so quickly her chair toppled over. "You're taking my daughter away from me because of a few mistakes?" The judge gave her a stern look. "Mrs. Carter, I suggest you compose yourself. My decision is final." She stormed out of the courtroom, leaving her lawyer scrambling to gather their things. I watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't a victory, it was just the end of a battle I never wanted to fight. Outside the courthouse, Diane patted me on the shoulder. "You did well, Jack. Now it's time to focus on rebuilding." I nodded, the weight of the day finally hitting me. "Thank you, Diane. For everything." As I walked to my car, I saw Ryan waiting for me. He grinned and pulled me into a bear hug. "You did it, man," he said. "Lily's going to be okay." For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile creep onto my face. "Yeah," I said. She is. That night, back at the motel, I tucked Lily into bed. She clung to her stuffed bunny, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Are we going to live here forever, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and tired. "No, sweetheart," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "This is just temporary. I'm going to find us a new home, a place where we can start fresh." She nodded, already drifting off. As I sat by her side, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Emma's betrayal had torn my world apart, but it had also forced me to see what truly mattered. Lily was my anchor, my reason to keep going. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: we would be okay. The weeks following the courtroom victory felt like a fragile calm after a devastating storm. There was relief, yes, but also an underlying tension. Emma was unpredictable, and while the judge's decision had granted me primary custody of Lily, I knew this wasn't over. I moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, a far cry from the suburban home I had built with Emma. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, it was ours. Lily was hesitant at first, clutching her stuffed bunny as we unpacked. "Is Mommy going to live here too?" she asked, her small voice cutting through the silence. I knelt down to her level, choosing my words carefully. "No, sweetheart. Mommy has her own place now. But this is our home, and I promise, it's going to be a happy one." She nodded slowly, though I could see the confusion in her eyes. I knew this wasn't something a 6-year-old could fully comprehend, but I hoped my reassurance would help her feel safe. Emma, however, didn't waste any time causing trouble. A few days after we moved in, I got a series of texts from her. "You're poisoning Lily against me. She's my daughter too, Jack. Don't forget that. You'll regret trying to keep her away from me." I didn't respond. Engaging with her would only fuel her fire, and I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Diane, who advised me to document everything in case Emma tried to make good on her threats. One evening, as Lily and I were settling into our new routine, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached cautiously. Peering through the peephole, I saw Emma standing on the other side, her arms crossed and her face set in a mask of irritation. I opened the door just enough to speak through the crack. "What are you doing here?" "I want to see Lily," she snapped, her tone sharp. "You can't keep her from me." "This isn't your night," I said firmly. The custody agreement was clear: Emma had visitation rights, but only on specified days. "I'm her mother, Jack," she hissed, stepping closer. "You can't just erase me from her life." "I'm not erasing you," I said, keeping my voice level for Lily's sake. "But you don't get to show up unannounced and disrupt her routine." Emma glared at me, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're going to pay for this," she said before turning on her heel and storming off. The next morning, I got a call from Diane. "Emma filed a motion to amend the custody arrangement," she said. "She's claiming you're alienating her from Lily." I felt my stomach drop. "Can she do that?" "She can try," Diane replied. "But with the evidence we have, I'm confident the judge will see through her claims. Just stay calm and stick to the agreement." The thought of another legal battle was exhausting, but I wasn't about to back down. Emma's manipulation had gone unchecked for too long, and I wasn't going to let her weaponize Lily against me. Meanwhile, I focused on building a new normal for Lily and me. Our mornings were filled with the rush of getting ready for school, packing lunches, and sharing quick hugs before she hopped out of the car. Evenings became our time to unwind, reading stories, watching movies, and talking about her day. One night, as we were cuddled up on the couch, she turned to me and said, "I like it here, Daddy. It feels like home." Her words brought tears to my eyes. For all the chaos Emma had caused, this moment reminded me why I was fighting so hard. Emma's next move came swiftly. A week before the court hearing for her motion, I got a call from Lily's school. "Mr. Carter, this is Principal Harris," the voice on the other end said. "There was an incident today involving your ex-wife." My heart raced. What happened? She showed up during recess and tried to take Lily off school grounds. Fortunately, one of the teachers intervened and stopped her. I felt a surge of anger and fear. "Is Lily okay?" "She's shaken but unharmed," the principal assured me. "We've already contacted the authorities and filed a report. Moving forward, we'll require written consent from you before allowing anyone other than you to pick her up." I thanked him and hung up, my hands trembling. Emma's recklessness had reached a new level, and it was clear she was spiraling out of control. At the next court hearing, Diane presented the school's incident report as further evidence of Emma's instability. "Your Honor," Diane said, "this behavior demonstrates a blatant disregard for the custody agreement and the well-being of the child. We request that Mrs. Carter's visitation rights be suspended until she completes a psychological evaluation." Emma's lawyer tried to argue that the incident was a misunderstanding, but the judge wasn't swayed. He ordered Emma to undergo counseling and limited her contact with Lily to supervised visits. As the gavel came down, I felt a wave of relief. For the first time, it seemed like the system was truly protecting Lily. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Is Mommy mad at me?" "No, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "Mommy just needs some time to work on a few things. But she loves you very much, and so do I." She nodded, her trust in me unwavering. As she drifted off to sleep, I sat by her side, vowing to give her the life she deserved, a life free from the chaos Emma had created. Life was finally settling into a rhythm. The storms Emma had unleashed seemed to be dissipating. Lily was thriving in her new school, laughing more, and asking fewer questions about her mom. For the first time in what felt like forever, I dared to exhale. But peace has a way of making you forget how quickly chaos can strike. It started with a knock on the door late one evening. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there stood Emma. She looked disheveled, her hair a tangled mess, her eyes bloodshot. A faint smell of alcohol clung to her. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice laced with irritation. She pushed past me into the apartment, ignoring my question entirely. "We need to talk," she slurred. "Emma, it's late. Lily's asleep. You can't just—" "I don't care about your rules, Jack," she snapped, spinning to face me. "I've had enough of you acting like you're some perfect father while painting me as the villain. Emma, you made your choices. This isn't about me painting you as anything, it's about what's best for Lily." Her laugh was hollow, almost manic. "Oh, save the sanctimony. You think you're better than me? You're just as much of a failure as I am." I crossed my arms, unwilling to let her bait me. "If you came here to fight, you can leave. Now." But then her expression shifted. Her anger melted into something that almost resembled vulnerability. She sank onto the couch, her shoulders slumping. "I've lost everything, Jack," she said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "The men, the money, the house, none of it means anything anymore. I thought I could control it all, but now I don't even know who I am." For a moment, I was speechless. This wasn't the Emma I knew, the fiery, manipulative woman who always had a plan. This was someone broken, grasping at the shards of a life she'd shattered. "I don't know what you want me to say," I admitted. She looked up at me, desperation etched into her features. "I want another chance. For us. For our family." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. A part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. After everything she'd done, she thought she could waltz back into my life and rewrite the narrative? "No," I said, my voice firm. You don't get to come here and ask for forgiveness like it's that simple. Lily and I are finally finding our footing, and I won't let you pull us back into the mess you created." Her face crumpled, but before she could respond, another sound broke through the tension, a loud crash from Lily's room. We both froze. Then I bolted toward her door, Emma stumbling after me. When I pushed the door open, my heart stopped. Lily's bed was empty, the window wide open. A rope ladder dangled from the sill, swaying in the breeze. "Lily!" I shouted, leaning out the window. There was no sign of her. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. What's happening?" I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. As I explained the situation to the operator, a horrifying realization hit me: this wasn't random. Someone had planned this. The police arrived within minutes, swarming the apartment. Officers questioned me and Emma separately, trying to piece together what had happened. Emma's presence only complicated matters, her emotional state making her an unreliable witness. Then, one of the officers found something, an envelope taped to the underside of Lily's bed. Inside was a note written in crude, blocky letters. "You took her from me. Now I'll take her from you." My blood ran cold. I handed the note to the officer, my mind racing. There was only one person who could have written this: Brian, one of Emma's former lovers. He had always been volatile, prone to jealousy and possessiveness. "Do you know who this is from?" the officer asked. I nodded, my jaw clenched. "Brian. He's dangerous, and he's obsessed with Emma." Emma's face went pale. I haven't seen him in months," she stammered. The officer didn't seem convinced. "We'll issue an alert and start tracking him immediately." Hours turned into an agonizing blur as the search for Lily unfolded. Every minute felt like an eternity, the fear gnawing at me like a relentless beast. Emma was inconsolable, pacing the room and muttering to herself. Then, just as dawn began to break, my phone rang. It was the police. "We found her," the officer said. "She's safe." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. I barely heard the details as the officer explained that they had intercepted Brian at a highway rest stop, thanks to a tip from a truck driver who had recognized Lily from the Amber Alert. When I arrived at the station to pick her up, I saw her sitting in a small room, clutching her stuffed bunny. She looked up as I walked in, her face lighting up. "Daddy," she cried, running into my arms. I held her tightly, my heart finally beginning to slow. "I've got you, sweetheart. You're safe now." Emma arrived moments later, her face a mix of relief and guilt. She tried to hug Lily, but Lily clung to me, burying her face in my shoulder. In the days that followed, I filed for a restraining order against Brian and worked with the police to ensure he faced charges for what he'd done. But this incident was the final nail in the coffin for Emma's involvement in Lily's life. The court stripped her of unsupervised visitation, and for the first time, I felt like we could truly move forward. As for me, I learned something unexpected from this ordeal. Life doesn't always tie up neatly. Pain doesn't simply vanish, and trust isn't easily rebuilt. But amid the chaos, I found strength I didn't know I had, a fierce, unyielding love for my daughter and an unwavering determination to protect her at all costs. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And together, Lily and I would write the next chapter on our own terms.